What a remarkable gift. A gift that united these two families, a gift that united Mother Teresa to this family even more deeply, not only as a provider to one in need, but as two generous hearts reaching out to the world. All because of generosity. Generosity that wasn't found in abundance of wealth, but in an abundance of capacity within the human heart. And so when we talk about the journey of generosity, we're talking about expanding that capacity within us. The capacity to reach out to our neighbor, the capacity to reach out even to strangers with whatever abundance we possess. So welcome to this morning's conversation as we explore together the journey of generosity. I'm fortunate today to have with me for this conversation Lisa Valley-Smith, our chair of the annual Stewardship Appeal and the Journey of Generosity Committee. And with us, three members of the vestry. Ned Johnson, our junior warden, Tracy McGee, a first-year vestry woman, and Ian Jones, who is new to the vestry, but not new to the conversation of stewardship, for his father and mother were intimately involved in this conversation for years here at Christ Church. And so we're going to just have a conversation about the journey of generosity that we share both individually and as a community, and then we'll open it up to some conversation with all of us. Well, you know, we were fortunate to have a conversation, as you can imagine, just the other day about this and in preparation for today. And I wanted to ask a question I actually didn't technically ask. I'm going to throw a small curveball, but I was thinking about it. I was thinking about our conversation, right? If it's a poor question, we'll move quickly on. But I wonder, in your own experience, just a starting point, who is somebody, or where have you experienced great generosity, not even great, just generosity towards yourself, towards you? Who has poured out some of their life for you in a generous way? Ian, you got the mic.
Lisa's got the mic too. She's already boycotted. She feels like she's talked enough already, which is fair, I think. So let's see, to answer that particular question, there's a lot of different moments in my life, looking all the way back. I was not a great student. I have a learning disability. So coming up through middle school and into high school, I relied on a couple of tutors who would take time out of their day, at the end of their day, to spend an hour, 90 minutes with me, working through whatever course load I needed to work through. It was not a paid engagement. It was a voluntary engagement. And not only was it, I think, critical just for the foundational skill development that was required, but, in those moments you get a lot of wisdom and kind of a life education through all that. And I'll always remember both of those tutors. They were taskmasters, to be sure. I didn't love going, and I didn't always love being there. But in the rearview mirror, when you look at that gift that was given, I think that those are the types of quiet moments of generosity that really last.
I would say for me, I felt a lot of generosity around the church that I grew up in with my parents. They were very active in church. They were in a group called the Merry Mates, which were all like sort of middle-aged married people, and us kids really hung out a lot together. Did a lot of family trips together, things of that nature. And I just remember feeling there was always a place I could go. There was always a group I could be with that would be generous with their time, with helping me grow my faith, and just really being there in social ways and faith-based ways. So that feeling of generosity from our whole congregation in the church growing up, I think, has always been important to me, and I wanted to find that for my kids. So that is what I've really felt generosity from that.
Of ours. So we moved into our current house about 13 years ago, and it was a a cold winter day, and I happen to look out the window, and I see an elderly lady struggling to get up our icy front porch. And I said, oh, what? I should have been better at shoveling the snow, right? That's the first thing. But I greeted her at the door, and it was a woman that Liz and I and my family have come to know and love over the years. Her name's Mrs. Michael. She lives next to us. She was in the snow and ice delivering us some food because we were new neighbors. You know, no one else on the block had done it, but she, with her cane and all, had struggled up our front porch to do that. Then over the years, she would continue to bring us food, continue to share her treats that she would make by hand with our kids as they grew. And she would, always invite them over to her house to, sit down and talk. And she didn't have to do any of that stuff. But what that did is it made me realize what a true neighbor is. And then, also, what it did for me is it opened my eyes to how I might be able to help her. So I one time tried to shovel her driveway, and she chased me off the front steps with a broom because because she didn't want my help. But that was just a small moment in time that led to me understanding what generosity is from a neighbor.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank the three of you for answering my invitation to participate today. I think that in and of itself was very generous, considering it's spring forward in daylight savings time. And as stewardship chair, my first official act will be for this never to happen again on this particular day. So many acts of generosity. I think a more recent one is my husband Jeff and I have a really good friend, and his mom had passed. She was the Greek Orthodox religion, and for a lot of different reasons, it was decided that it wouldn't be appropriate for her to have her funeral at that church. And Jeff and I were really able to minister them through this. And I said, well, I don't know if Drew will do this, but he was able to do a funeral for them. And they were so touched. And it was a beautiful gift to a family that was in great need.
Thank you guys for that generosity of it, adapting to a curveball to get us started. Generosity is all around us. I think it's something we, when we open our eyes, when we're aware of it, it can be found in all of these places. But it's also something that we learn. It's not something that just, sure, it comes naturally in some places and maybe to some more than others, but it's for all of us, it's something we learn. And so I'm wondering, in your experience, was there somebody in your life that kind of taught you or opened your eyes to what generosity could mean for you? No, we can pop around.
Just to change up the order for you. I would say that generosity in my family was set with my grandmother as an example, that she was always giving to us as a family, whether it be meals. We have so many like chicken dumpling dinners and Thanksgiving dinner where she would serve like 30 people and the house would be clean by the time we got there. She was amazing with her cooking. But even like her time in so many other ways, she was very active with different senior groups, with our church, and she was one of the last of her friends to still be able to drive, and I think she picked up like 14 people on the way to church. I don't even know how she fit them all in her car, but she would pick up all of her friends to get to church every day or every Sunday, and so she just looked for ways, big and small, to be generous, and so I think that helped to set the tone for how, it's my mom's mom, so my mom's attitude towards it and what I witnessed as a child growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Drew, you invoked, Heather and David. I mean, that's certainly, modeled behavior is certainly, I think, something we can all relate to. My mom and dad were big givers back in Buffalo with, St. Paul's Cathedral. So I was indoctrinated early into the concept of if you care about a community, if you care about an institution, and this applied for the arts, for educational institutions with my folks, with everything. They said if you really care about it, if you believe in it, if you think it brings value to the world, then it's your responsibility to contribute to that and to nurture it, and to do that with whatever opportunities that you have in your life. So I would say that there was certainly that. I could point to so many examples here in Christ Church. Kind of jumping off of your example, Karen comes to mind. Her generosity with my mom for the last 5-6 years was, tremendous. So finding that kind of generosity in this community, let's keep it very local. As I came through my life, I was married in this church. I baptized both of my children in this church. I've now held funerals for both of my parents in this church. So, for me, it's about making sure that everybody else who needs that in their lives can come here and find it. So that's where I give from is the concept of how do I make sure that this institution, this community, this gift is here for other generations.
Really, really well said, and hard to follow. I like Tracy and Ian, grew up seeing generosity in a church setting from my mother, continuously dragging me to 7 a.m. Sunday Mass, and as I was telling you folks before, I never really understood why she was giving a check to the church, and she probably had a trite answer, something to the effect of keep the lights on. But I really understood how important it was to her, and I like your term of modeled behavior, Ian. But to skip forward a few decades, so I had seen that throughout my life, but I honestly don't think it was until I became more involved in Christ Church that I understood the power of generosity, not just from perhaps me helping others, but what it does for me, right? Through urging and prodding of many of you, I've become more involved over the years, right? From everything from you may have seen me selling Christmas trees on the front lawn to working at rebuilding together events, but it's that sense of community and me giving to the church that I know helps build that community and allow me to have that sense of generosity.
Well, I share the philosophy of generosity being modeled so much by our parents. My parents were very philanthropic and very generous with their treasures. And they gave a lot to healthcare organizations over the years. And their name is in a number of walls. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from people, my husband's in the ICU, and I saw Robert in Virginia Valley's name outside, and it just gave me a sense of peace. I've also heard from people who said, I just got a colonoscopy, and I saw your parents' name, and I'm like, well, I didn't think they knew that that their name was going to be right there. But yeah, I mean, definitely from my parents, and Jeff and I have carried on that tradition, and our children have too. It's part of our life now.
As I listen to you, I'm struck by how woven into each of your experiences the church is as a place not only of receiving generosity, and not only as a place of offering generosity, but actually a place of teaching it. I don't know that I had seen that as clearly until, as I am in your conversation, because there aren't that many places outside that are teaching generosity. We're being taught a lot of different things, but I don't think generosity is one of them. And so I want to kind of follow that track for a sec. I wonder, for yourselves, I know you've already talked a little bit about it, but maybe put a pin in it a little bit more clearly. What are the things that, in your experience, inspire your generosity? What are the things that where does that come from within you personally?
Well, I'll start out this time. Jeff was telling me the other day about a study that he read about, and they were asking young people what brings them happiness. And the two biggest things were fame and money. Oh. And I'm sure Jeff probably has bookmarked that somewhere, and you can ask him the details afterwards, but it was really heartbreaking for both of us and has a lot of relevance to this discussion here. And, our young people are being bombarded with, it's just a big algorithm, it's a piece of software that's making them think this way and shaping their lives and values. And I think, our families and church have a more important role than ever in helping younger people to see the value of giving and to receive.
My preacher hat on for a moment, just in response to that. It doesn't surprise me that our world and our kids are seeing wealth and fame as roots of happiness. It's kind of out there all the time. But here's a fundamental problem with that. Wealth and fame are only for a few, right? There are only, we can probably count how many billionaires there are probably among us. Like how many billionaires there are in the world. We could probably come up with that number pretty close among us. Right? It's just wealth and fame are not available to everybody. There's only one Taylor Swift out there. Generosity and the joy that comes with it, as that this wasn't planned, as that opening story shared, is actually available to all of us, right? Generosity is something that comes out of us. It's not a possession we have. It's just something that resides within our hearts, that then extends the things that we have, time, talent, treasure, towards others. And that brings a different type of relationship, a different type of joy, something that is available to all of our kids right now. And so what a profoundly important message, and not just message, wisdom to offer our kids and to offer one another to live in a different way. So thank you for offering that as a kind of leaping off point. So others, what inspires your generosity?
Well, so for my family, I think in myself, what inspires our generosity, especially or specifically to Christ Church, is the energy of Christ Church and the programming. My husband and I both grew up in very faith-based families, but two different faiths, and so we got married, had kids, and we thought this was great. Like, we both will go to church. Well, we never really talked about, which church and which denomination. So it got a little sticky there for a while. And so we were basically on a 20-year faith journey of trying to find the right fit between a Roman Catholic and a more liberal Protestant church that we both grew up in. And So we've been through a couple different churches and a couple of different denominations, and it wasn't actually until a baseball field conversation with Brady and Sam playing on the same team that Kevin and Father Drew started talking religion at a baseball game, and Kevin was like, I think we should look at Christ Church. And so I was like, yeah, I was like, absolutely, I will, definitely we'll look into it. And it was kind of during COVID, so as we came out of COVID, we started to come more regularly, and I was just immediately impressed, even then, with the number of outreach programs and the number of like adult formation and Sunday school, and just, I think maybe as long-term members, you forget how enriched this community is and how many things you really do. And so right away, we found things for the boys to get involved in, things for us to get involved in. I work at Karsten's, we go to Crossroads, the boys Aqualite, I lecture, and I was just, oh, Euchre nights. Yeah, I think that may have been the point that really drove it home for Kevin. So we go to the Euchre nights. So just realizing how much programming was available to our family and how welcoming everybody was. I mean, we really found our church home here. And so now we've been here about 5 years. And really, so what inspired me on my generosity here is to give back and to support those programs that we have benefited from. Not only what we receive from them, but I think, as I was saying, through the act of giving and the act of participating, setting examples for our family of ways to be involved in the community. So really the energy and the breadth of programming has inspired us to be generous to the church.
Within my family, and I think I work hard at that. But it's really hard for me to find other places in my life besides my family and this church where I have any incentive or any inclination to offer generosity. To your point, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of venues out there unless you seek them out and are very intentional about it, to offer generosity and feel generosity. That is, I think, something foundational and probably the most important part of my relationship with Christ Church, in that it's been a place that has allowed me to experience generosity, but then also be generous to others, and that's a powerful feeling.
I think on a more existential global level, it's probably the inspiration is inequality. I think need. It's so obvious. You could parse it out, whatever bite size you can manage. You can look down the street. You can drive through our city. Our region is fraught with need and inequality. And then you look at the country, the world. It just I think as long as that exists, I think there is a greater call for giving and for generosity and for grace, because I think those of us who, whether it's the fortune of birthright or because you're in a system that grants you favor, I think it becomes an obligation that we need to pay back into that gap and try and close that gap. You talked about, the billionaires, and, there's a lot of that going around right now in the algorithms about how we could take care of a lot of the problems in this world if 100 people would share a little bit. And it would not marginally impact their wealth in any scale that they could possibly imagine. But it simply is unspeakable. We can't talk about that. So that's what inspires me. I mean, I think we owe it to each other. I think we owe it to the species to do better, and so I think now it's just a matter of finding where it is that you feel you can give, and where you see that being most productive in the world. And I definitely believe that Christ Church and the Episcopal Church represents that.
Well, that's a real good launch into a different thread of this, and that is the why is generosity so necessary and so valuable, either on a social level, as you were just talking about it, Ian, or on a personal level, a bit as you've been talking about it, Ned. So I want to just kind of open up for a little more conversation there. What does generosity do for us, right? What does it do for the world, and what does it do for us personally? Why is it valuable to even pursue as individuals and as Christians?
So in my viewpoint, I think a lot of the studies you read, if about happiness, maybe it's not fame and fortune, but is gratitude, and the idea of just taking a moment each day to be thankful for the gifts you've received, the gifts you've given, where you're blessed. And so I've done that for many years, sort of the gratitude journal, the 5 things today that inspired you. And I think that for me personally, the act of generosity, whether it's my time here or with the schools, or I do a lot with the library, those are ways I've manifest my gratitude, right? Like something I can do to show it, to pay it forward. And a lot of that is financial as well. As Lisa was saying, in this panel, find the things that are important to you. We're generous with the library, we're generous with the church. And to me, it's a way to manifest that gratitude and to bring that feeling of, satisfaction that you're able to support the things that you love and close some gaps maybe, and just really kind of bring that gratitude, physically out into the world, which then in turn sort of gives you those endorphins and that, happiness feeling. So it kind of is a fortuitous circle in that regard, so.
Well, because I'm stewardship chair, I'll address the why from a little more practical matter. There's several aspects in which the church raises money and generates revenue. And the annual appeal is a really important piece of that. We had a very successful campaign that funded our endowment. And we have gotten more formalized around plan giving, which is estate gifts and those kinds of things. But the annual appeal is critical to our annual operating budget. Yes, Richard Best. And having sat on the finance committee, I saw it personally. It allows the church to do the work of the church. And it is also a way for every member to participate in helping the church to do its work. We couldn't function without it. And a strong annual appeal with a great amount of participation signals to our membership and our community that our parishioners are invested in the success and the future and the sustainability of the church. So it's really important from that standpoint as well. And get your pledge in by April 7th. Yeah.
A different tact, and maybe a closing question for us. Generosity can be hard. Pledging can be hard. I wonder what are some of the challenges to generosity that you encounter?
Day-to-day life and expenses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But to the point that many of you have been making, it's being generous just, feels so good personally, and you see the benefit it provides to others. You see the warmth coming from others when you are generous. So I really like Ian's point about modeling that behavior. So I hope by me sitting up here today and talking about how Christ Church has helped me realize what generosity feels like, that others can be motivated to help the church, because it will be something that will also help you feel that generosity, that gratitude, what you can do for others.
A challenge, but an obstacle might just be the understanding of the importance of it. When we first came to Christ Church, we pretty quickly started giving pretty regularly, but we probably didn't do a pledge card for maybe a couple of years. And partly it just wasn't in the tradition that I grew up in, that you did the pledge. I thought, well, the church knows I'm giving. But to understand more the importance of the planning that can go into the church calendar and the church resources when they have the pledge cards turned in and they know what funds to expect, it took me a little bit to realize and understand. And then I started to do that over the last few years, just because, again, wanting to give back to the community that's giving us so much. And if it's important to the planning of the church, well, then, we should participate in that as well. So I think that is one obstacle. And the other is just understanding the importance of every little bit helps, right? I mean, it's a very wealthy community, I guess, and you might think like, okay, well, there's others that are going to give way more than me, so what's the importance of my gift? But every bit helps, and every bit you're invested in the programming financially, I think it then follows up that you become more active with your time as well and things of that nature. So I think just realizing that we all need to do our part, however big and small, is an obstacle to think about or to overcome when giving.
I think uncertainty is certainly going to get in the way. It certainly fuels some of the discussions at my table. I think that act of giving, though, is kind of that light in the dark. It's the pushing back against that uncertainty and that fear and that that kind of ominous threat. And I think it can be, one might accuse one of being a little reckless or careless about certain things if you start giving too much away. But I think it's an important thing to grab hold of and to try. And I think there's a difference too between giving and pledging, right? And I think the giving part, whether it's 12 cents, $12, $36, whatever can be given, give. More importantly, I think, pledge, whether it's 12 cents, $12, because the act of pledging is a declaration. It's a standing up and saying, it matters, and it matters enough that I'm going to do what I can do. And I think the other thing that, I was thinking a lot about it after our conversations about why pledge card, because it's a discussion that I have with my wife. I see it as leadership. I think that if all of us stood up and made a pledge, which probably, I'm guessing, considering the day and the coffee hour, I'm guessing most everybody here is, but, I think it is a declaration of, we believe in this. We want it to be a rock. We want it to be immutable. We want it to transcend time. And I think by just pledging and declaring, we really make that clear. We make it clear to the community in which we live, and we make it clear to a higher, audience. So I think it's worth considering it in both those ideas.
I was going to offer a last thought, but I think that is a fantastic. Please don't do that, though. Lisa, Ned, Tracy, Ian, thank you for a wonderful conversation on the journey of generosity. And thank you all. As Lisa noted, April 7th is the date we ask you to submit your annual pledge, or between now and then, we'll offer them and receive them in the context of our worship service that day as well. But even more importantly, as Ian invited us, let us join together and make that statement, both to one another, to ourselves, to our children and family, to our community, and to Christ, that we stand together for a world of generosity, a world of hope, and a world of grace. Thank you. The cards are being mailed. I was supposed to ask a question or two, and I should still invite a question or two. So I'm going to pause for a sec. Are there any questions for me or any of us that we've inspired? Yeah, Cheryl, then I'm going to, yes, thank you, Ian. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll answer both of the questions. So we have two campaigns that are present in our life today. Cheryl, you were just noting our To Excel in Love capital campaign that Lisa chaired for the last 2.5 years. That was a part of a strategic plan in our life to grow our endowment, to firm up the foundation of our ministry. And that campaign, whilst kind of continues to be ongoing and invites our planned and estate gifts in particular, is available to us to support the endowment and the sustainability of Christ Church, not only for this year, but for generations. We also, on an annual basis, have our annual stewardship campaign, the Journey of Generosity, which is fundamentally, as I think we were just chatting about, really about the way we live our life in this world. Can we develop and grow in generosity so that we bring generosity not only to Christ Church, but into our homes, into our workplaces, into the world, so that the world might be a better place. And so the annual conversation, the annual campaign for our pledge is the Journey of Generosity. You will all, to John's question, you will all receive a letter and a pledge card at home, in your mail at home. You're welcome to fill that out and return it. You can go online to christchurchgp.org. There's the Give page. You can make a pledge there. You can call the office. And you'll be directed to Tim Wood, and Tim will be great at speaking with you and grateful to speak with you and to take your pledge that way. So a lot of ways to make your pledge known. But most directly, you'll all receive it, a letter and a card in the mail this week, in fact. Other questions? Yeah. That's a great question, because we're doing something very odd. Most churches do the annual campaign in the fall, and we did it in the fall for years, for decades, probably. And we disconnected the annual campaign from the annual budget about 3 years ago, intentionally, so that we could have a conversation like this. That really drives home and drives a conversation about how this journey of generosity and how pledging impacts our life individually and as a family and as a society. That it's not actually just about raising dollars for the church. But that leads to a confusion. So what am I pledging for? Your pledge is a pledge for this calendar year, right? So you will have likely given some money already, and let's just say we're 2 months in and you've given $500 to date. Why do I choose odd numbers like that? I'm gonna. 12. You went with 12. That was a smart one. So let's say you've given $200 to date, and you might say, well, okay, I'm going to give, therefore, $1,200 this year, and that would be your pledge. Or you might say, after a conversation like this, I've given $200, but you know what? I really want to challenge myself to expand that generosity. So this year, I'm actually going to pledge $1,500, and I'm going to complete that throughout the remainder of this year, right? So it is a pledge for this calendar year, taking into account what you may have already given as well. Does that clarify that well? Good. Yeah, it's the 2025. Yeah, thank you. Other questions for me or for any of our friends? Okay, well, with that then, I will thank you guys again for an insightful and generous conversation. Yeah. And I will look forward to continuing this conversation even more, our journey of generosity with one another.